Well, while much of the world's attention is focused on the Iran war, other conflicts are continuing, including the war against Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a conflict that could shape Europe's security for decades. There's no end to the conflict in sight, and a bigger question may be what comes after. Regardless of the outcome, will Russia emerge weakened and contained, or more dangerous and unpredictable? My next guest argues it's likely to be the latter. His warning is that Europe is entering a new era of confrontation with Russia, with some analysts even calling it a new Iron Curtain. The widening band of tension stretches from the Arctic along Russia's border with NATO countries like Finland, through the Baltic states, down past Kaliningrad and into Ukraine and the Black Sea. Borders in this region are hardening and militaries are being strengthened as both sides prepare for long-term rivalry and potential confrontation. And the concern is that while attention is elsewhere, this divide is becoming ever more entrenched and ever more dangerous. Eugene Rumer is director of the Russia and Eurasia program at the Carnegie Foundation for International Peace. He authored their report entitled Belligerent and Beleaguered: Russia After the War with Ukraine. Welcome to DW. In that piece, you argue that Russia will come out of its war with Ukraine weaker but more dangerous. Just talk us through that.
Yeah, well, it's hard to see how Russia will come out of it stronger and better off than it was before the war. It has lost perhaps over 1 million people killed and wounded. Untold hundreds of thousands of Russians, some of the most skilled and enterprising Russians, have left the country because they want to avoid being drafted into the Russian military. The Russian economy has been cut off from some of the most dynamic engines of the global economy and has been reduced to basically being a petrostate. I'm exaggerating, but not by much. Europe before the war really did not see Russia as a major existential threat to it, whereas now, as a result of this war, Europe is beginning to rearm and really considers Russia to be its number one threat, really an existential threat. So it's hard to see how Russia is better off as a result of this.
Okay. What you've described there, we can see how Russia is weakened. Explain to us why you regard it as being more dangerous, because I suppose the logical assumption would be that after a debilitating conflict, whichever way it ends, the tendency would be to look inward to rebuild. Why do you think that Russia would continue to look outward and that Europe should fear this weakened adversary?
Well, as a result of this war, as a result of turning Ukraine into its implacable adversary, Russia is subjected to daily attacks from Iranian drones and missiles. NATO now includes Finland and Sweden, and the line of contact between Russia and NATO is now literally on the doorstep of what historically has been the Russian heartland. So if you put yourself in the shoes of Russian national security decision makers, it's not a status quo that they're prepared to tolerate. Traditionally, they have looked at strategic depth, sort of the territory, the land between their heartland and the next biggest, most powerful country in the European theater, as the critical requirement for Russian security. They have now lost that strategic depth. Think about the Cold War, think about the Warsaw Pact, think about Belarus, Ukraine, these countries that were effectively the buffer between Russia and NATO. That is now gone. And as I said before, the Russian heartland, including Moscow, including cities east of Moscow, are now subjected to daily attacks. I mean, just the other night, the city of Sызrань on the Volga River, sort of southeast of Russia, was struck with 11 Ukrainian drones. How is that sort of feeds into Russia feeling better off, more secure, something that is becoming a normal kind of state for Russia? No, of course not.
And what's interesting about your analysis is that I think it's as you see it, it applies regardless of whether Russia wins, loses, or continues this war with Ukraine. It continues to be debilitated militarily and economically, and the danger continues to increase whichever way this war goes.
Yes. Historically, I mean, we're returning to sort of the normal state of relations between Russia and the rest of Europe, which has been characterized by, hostility. That's been the norm between Russia, the Soviet Union, and again, the Russian Empire before that. And one of the major goals of Russian foreign policy in Europe has been the acquisition of ever more territory to acquire that margin of safety, margin of physical security.
Right.
So now that Russia has lost that margin, I'm convinced that it'll be looking for the next round to regain it. Because,
Except
as I said a
that,
moment ago, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Except that, how does a weakened, debilitated, economically struggling Russia that may or may not still be involved in a war with Ukraine, how does it have the financial and military means to start a war elsewhere in Europe?
Well, don't forget that it is an immensely rich country. Yes, it has been, it has suffered a major setback as a result of this war, but it is still the biggest country in Europe. It still has the biggest military in Europe. It has a militarized economy, which is benefiting from support from China, massive deliveries of equipment for Russian defense industries from China. And, the combination of this mindset, vast, almost inexhaustible resources, a population that is basically accepting the war as a necessity, so far at least, all that makes for a more dangerous, and I should add also a committed leadership. All that makes for a more dangerous, insecure, belligerent Russia.
And do you see the end, the apex of that danger and belligerence? Are you actually contemplating outright war between Russia and Europe?
Well, I think a lot will depend on how Europe, and to a large extent the United States, will respond to this new situation, to Russia sort of looking for revenge. I don't see the war between Russia and Ukraine ending in a way that World War II ended or World War I ended. I see it perhaps as a frozen conflict or some kind of a ceasefire, after which both sides begin to prepare for the next round. And the critical question is, will Europe be ready and willing to engage in this kind of competition against Russia and prepare its capabilities to defend against possible future aggression against a European NATO member, and continue to deter Russia as it has over the course of the entire Cold War and actually since the end of the Cold War as well.
But isn't that where we are now? Forgive me, isn't that where we are now? European countries and NATO countries increasing their defense spending and military readiness precisely because the United States has become unreliable and Russia has become an active threat.
You're absolutely correct. This is something that is underway in Europe. It is unfortunate that the relationship between the United States and Russia, the United States and Europe is in the state that it's in, but that's the reality. And it's an encouraging sign that Europe is waking up to this new reality. But there's a lot more to be done. It's not just a question of money. It's a question of the mindset. It's a question of the populations, European populations being prepared for, this new threat environment that is upon us, upon Europe. and really coming to terms with it.
So would it be fair then to say that you see there to be a sort of short to mid-term danger zone, if I can put it that way? The time between now and when NATO countries have finally put in place the preparations they're only just starting. Is that where Europe is most vulnerable?
I think you put it well. I think you're right. Europe is vulnerable. I remain convinced that it's a relatively low chance of Russia attacking another European country, such as one of its Baltic neighbors. But I cannot rule it out, and I can also see that Putin, who has a tendency to double down in the face of setbacks and defeats, could actually seize this moment to show that NATO is a paper tiger, is a hollow alliance, and stage some kind of a provocation in one of Russia's Baltic neighbors.
Right.
So I do believe that we are in a dangerous moment.
All of which supposes that Russia's posture towards Europe and towards NATO remains hostile. Vladimir Putin is 73 years old. He can't go on forever. So what sort of Russia do you see following him?
That's right. He cannot go on forever. But and there will be some kind of a generational change, if only because, as you said, a function of time. That said, I do believe that these kinds of long-term drivers of Russian insecurity, having to do with strategic depth, having to do with new technologies emerging and being acquired by European countries that have the ability to strike deep into Russia, will continue to feed the next generation of Russian leaders, Russian national security thinkers. I'm convinced of that. That said, I do believe that there is going to be, some kind of a lessening of tensions, perhaps call it a détente when the new generation comes in and realizes the situation that the country is in. The Russians have a word передышка, kind of a break, but it does not change the long-term trajectory of adversarial relations between Russia and Europe.
Okay, that's I think Mark Carney was saying this week. That's crossing your fingers and hoping is not really a plan. So what's the main thing that European policymakers, do you believe, should now focus on?
They should focus on their comprehensive integrated plans for defending Europe, deterring Russia, for developing options to deal with what is likely to be Russian nuclear blackmail, and preserve as much as they can the transatlantic relationship, because in the long term, I do believe that the United States and Russia will resume their adversarial relationship, notwithstanding the Trump administration's preference for closer relations with the Putin regime. I do believe that regardless of that, Russia views the United States also as a source of existential threat. So those issues will not go away. And I believe that preserving the transatlantic relationship is absolutely essential.
All right, that gives us all plenty to get on with in the meantime. Good talking to you. Thank you for talking us through that. Eugene Rumer from the Carnegie Foundation for International Peace.
Thanks for having me.